Keanu Reeves, one of the most beloved actors in the world, known for his humility and generosity, has always believed that success only has meaning when shared. But behind the cameras, few people know that he invested part of his fortune to build a hospital, a place that was meant to treat everyone with dignity, regardless of their financial status. One day, driven by a feeling and some concerning reports, he decides to visit his own hospital, but without revealing his identity. Disguised as an ordinary patient, he walks through the reception doors expecting to see empathy and professionalism, but what he finds shocks him to his core. In charge of the emergency ward is an arrogant doctor who abuses his power, treating patients with contempt, humiliating those who need help the most, and choosing who deserves to be seen. But what this doctor doesn't know is that among the people he is mistreating is the true owner of the hospital. Keanu watches everything in silence, restraining his indignation. But how long will he stay quiet? How will this story end? Stay with us until the end to find out. Oh, and before we continue, tell us, where are you watching this video from? We love hearing from you and always read the comments. Keanu Reeves sat in his office, gazing out of the large glass window. Below, the city lights flickered, cars sped by, and lives intertwined without ever truly noticing each other. He had achieved a lot: fame, fortune, respect. But he had never forgotten what it felt like to be treated as a nobody. That was why he decided to invest in building a hospital, not just as a charity project, but as a model institution where everyone would be treated with dignity, regardless of their financial status. But something was wrong, terribly wrong. Official reports claimed everything was running smoothly, but Keanu had started receiving anonymous complaints, and this was unacceptable. There was only one way to find out the truth. He would go there himself, disguised as a regular patient, and see things with his own eyes. That evening, Keanu got on his old black motorcycle, threw on a worn-out jacket and faded jeans, and rode to the hospital as just another patient. When he walked through the glass doors, no one recognized him. The man who starred in action films, who was loved worldwide, was now just another face in the crowd. He walked toward the reception desk, where a tired-looking woman typed away on her computer without glancing up. Keanu patiently waited. "Good evening, I'd like to schedule a consultation." The receptionist finally looked at him. Her gaze scanned his simple clothes and her expression turned impatient. "Name?" "Keanu." She raised an eyebrow and typed into the system. "Insurance?" "I'd rather pay in cash." She rolled her eyes, sighed, and handed him a small slip of paper. "Wait your turn. It's going to take a while." Keanu took the paper without complaint and walked to the waiting area, sitting down between an elderly man with a pained expression and a mother holding a feverish baby. As Keanu sat there, he began observing everything around him. A desperate young mother held her sick baby. The child was visibly burning with fever, his tiny chest rising and falling rapidly. His mother, exhausted and on the verge of tears, stood up and approached the receptionist. "Please, my baby is very sick. He needs a doctor now." The receptionist didn't even glance up. "Ma'am, I told you already, you need to wait your turn." "But he's getting worse." The receptionist sighed, her irritation obvious. "If you're so worried, maybe you should take him to a public hospital. Here we follow rules." Keanu narrowed his eyes. Then, on his other side, he saw an elderly man clutching his chest. He was breathing heavily, wincing as he tried to call for a nurse. A young nurse walked past him without stopping, only giving him a brief glance before saying, "Sir, I can't stop everything for every little pain. Just wait your turn." The elderly man groaned in pain, doubling over slightly. Keanu felt his fists clench. No one should be treated this way. Keanu lifted his gaze and saw a man in a tailored suit walk past the reception desk. He didn't need a number. He didn't need to wait. The staff smiled at him and quickly made way. "Dr. Javier is expecting you, sir. You can go right in." Keanu watched the hypocrisy unfold. The rich were treated like kings. Those who needed help the most were ignored. He felt his jaw tighten but took a slow breath. He needed to see more before acting. After a few minutes, Keanu stood up and walked back to the reception desk. "Excuse me." The receptionist looked at him with annoyance. "Yes?" Keanu gestured discreetly toward the mother with the baby and the elderly man clutching his chest. "They seem to need urgent help. Are you sure there's nothing that can be done?" The receptionist frowned, irritated. "I already told you, everyone has to wait their turn. Those are the rules." Keanu remained silent for a moment, his dark eyes analyzing the situation. "Rules can be broken when a life is at risk." The receptionist huffed. "And what makes you think you know more than the doctors?" Keanu didn't answer right away. He just gave a small smirk, shook his head slightly, and walked back to his seat. He had already seen enough. This hospital was not what he had envisioned. Something was deeply wrong, and he was going to fix it. What Keanu didn't know yet was that in just a few minutes, one of the most arrogant doctors in the hospital was about to do something so unacceptable that he could no longer just sit and watch. It was time to act. But first, he needed to see with his own eyes just how deep the corruption ran. The hospital buzzed with noise. The reception area was packed. Nurses rushed back and forth, trying to manage the overwhelming workload. Amidst this chaos, one man walked as if he were above it all. Dr. Javier Fuentes. Tall, perfectly styled hair, cold and sharp eyes, wearing a pristine white coat. He held an expensive cup of coffee, strolling through the corridors without acknowledging the patients around him. To him, they were just numbers. A desperate scream echoed in the reception area. The mother with the feverish baby ran toward the doctor, clutching her child in her arms. "Doctor, please, my baby is burning up. He needs help now." Dr. Javier paused mid-stride, his eyes lazily scanning the woman from head to toe. His disgusted expression was like someone who had just stepped on something unpleasant. He rolled his eyes, took a slow sip of coffee, and then spoke. "If he's sick, then wait like everyone else. This hospital is not a daycare." The mother froze, shocked by the doctor's cruelty. "But he could be seriously ill. He's getting weaker." The doctor sighed impatiently, leaning slightly toward her. "Listen carefully. Do you think you're the only person with problems here? If I stopped everything for every kid with the flu, this hospital would go bankrupt." Keanu Reeves, sitting in the waiting area, felt his blood boil. His jaw tightened, his hands clenched slightly, but he remained outwardly calm. Inside, his indignation was growing by the second. Dr. Javier kept walking, as if the scene had never happened. Two nearby nurses exchanged uneasy glances, but neither dared to speak up. Keanu noticed something crucial at that moment: fear. The staff knew what kind of person Dr. Javier was, but no one had the courage to confront him. The mother returned to her seat, now silently crying as she held her child close. Keanu glanced at the elderly man beside him, who was still clutching his chest, his breathing labored. "Sir, are you okay?" Keanu asked gently. The man forced a tired smile, as if he were used to being ignored. "I've been through worse. I just have to wait." Keanu closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. He was now seeing firsthand what people had warned him about, and now he was certain that something had to change. A few minutes later, a young man with a deep cut on his hand entered the reception area. He was holding a blood-soaked cloth against the wound, his expression a mix of pain and urgency. "Please, I need help." The receptionist nodded casually and directed him to Dr. Javier's office. Keanu leaned forward slightly in his seat, curious to see how the doctor would handle this situation. The young man stepped inside the consultation room, but just seconds later, Dr. Javier's voice rang through the corridor, loud and mocking. "Are you serious? You came here for that?" The hospital went silent for a moment. The young man hesitated. "Doctor, it's bleeding a lot and it really hurts." Dr. Javier let out a sarcastic laugh. "That's just a scratch, kid. Put some alcohol on it and go home." Keanu watched with a cold, unreadable expression. The young man paused, clearly humiliated. Dr. Javier waved him off impatiently. "There are people dying in here, and you expect me to waste my time on a little cut?" The boy lowered his head, embarrassed, and walked out without receiving proper treatment. As he passed, Keanu stood up and approached him. "Let me see your hand." The young man looked up, surprised. "Who are you?" Keanu gave him a calm, reassuring smile. "Just someone who cares." He took a clean handkerchief from his pocket and helped press it against the boy's wound. Across the room, Dr. Javier watched the scene with a mixture of irritation and amusement. He had no idea who was standing in front of him, and if he did, he would have been far more careful with the words he was about to say. What Dr. Javier didn't know was that among the patients he was treating with such disrespect, there was a man who could change his life forever, and the moment of truth was fast approaching. The hospital continued to buzz with murmurs, hurried footsteps, and the muffled sound of keyboards clacking at the reception desk. Keanu Reeves remained seated, seemingly calm, but inside, a fire was beginning to burn. He had seen enough. The negligence, the contempt, the coldness. Dr. Javier Fuentes, the doctor in charge of that wing, acted as if he were above everything and everyone. To him, patients were nothing more than inconveniences, and each consultation seemed like a tedious obligation. But he still didn't know who he was dealing with. In this hospital, the name Keanu Reeves meant nothing to him, and that was about to change. After a long wait, Keanu's name was finally called. "Next patient, Keanu." The receptionist glanced at the form, but didn't bother to ask for his last name. He stood up slowly, took a deep breath, and walked toward Dr. Javier's office. Upon entering, he found the doctor sitting behind his desk, typing on his computer without even looking up. The office was clean and minimalistic, but it felt cold and impersonal. Dr. Javier was typing with evident boredom, and without looking at Keanu, he muttered, "So, what's the problem?" Keanu studied him for a moment before answering calmly, "I've been feeling extreme fatigue and muscle pain. I'd like a full checkup." The doctor finally lifted his gaze and looked at Keanu for the first time. His eyes scanned Keanu's simple clothing, the old jacket, the worn-out jeans, his composed posture. Dr. Javier frowned, as if he were analyzing someone who clearly didn't belong there. Then he smirked slightly, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Where are you from?" Keanu raised an eyebrow slightly. "Why?" Dr. Javier leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Because hospitals like this aren't for just anyone." Silence filled the room. Keanu didn't move. His expression remained neutral. He had been through many things in life. He had heard all kinds of prejudice, had been judged by appearances, and had been underestimated countless times. But this was the first time someone had told him this inside a hospital that he himself had built. Dr. Javier sighed, still holding on to his smug expression. "All right, let's get this over with." He picked up his stethoscope with obvious reluctance, as if he were about to perform a completely unnecessary task. "Take a deep breath." Keanu complied. The doctor barely bothered to listen properly. Then, he asked a few basic questions, not paying much attention to the answers. In less than 3 minutes, he was already grabbing his pen to fill out the medical form. "You don't have anything serious," he said, tossing the paper onto the desk. "Take some painkillers and get some rest." Keanu glanced at the form, then back at the doctor. "That's it?" Dr. Javier leaned forward, clearly bored with the conversation. "That's it." "What if it was something serious? You didn't run any tests, didn't ask for my medical history." The doctor let out a short, dry laugh. "Look, buddy, I see dozens of people every day. I know when someone has something serious, and when they're just dealing with common fatigue." Keanu stayed silent for a moment, crossing his arms. "Could you explain to me exactly what's wrong with me?" Dr. Javier rolled his eyes. "I already told you, you're fine. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have more important patients to see." Keanu remained seated, his gaze locked on the doctor. "More important patients?" The doctor let out an exaggerated sigh, clearly annoyed at Keanu's persistence. "Yes, people who actually need my attention." That was when Keanu fully realized. Dr. Javier wasn't just being rude. He genuinely believed that some lives were worth more than others. And this wasn't just a bad attitude problem. It was a moral failure. Keanu stood up slowly and walked toward the door. Before leaving, he paused and looked at the doctor one last time. It was a calm but piercing gaze. Dr. Javier noticed and raised an eyebrow, confused. "What?" he asked, irritated. Keanu gave a slight smile, but it wasn't a friendly one. "Thank you for your time, doctor. I hope you treat the other patients with more respect than you treated me." The doctor let out a short, amused chuckle. "Oh yeah, and who are you to lecture me?" Keanu didn't answer. He simply turned and walked out, closing the door behind him. But before he could take more than a few steps down the corridor, a nurse quietly grabbed his arm. "Sir, I'm so sorry about what happened in there," she whispered, looking around as if afraid of being overheard. Keanu turned to her, his gaze curious. "Is it always like this?" The nurse lowered her head, ashamed. "Yes, but no one dares to challenge him. He's untouchable." Keanu remained silent for a few seconds, absorbing everything. He already knew what he needed to do, but there was still one more piece of the puzzle missing. He needed to gather more proof before making his move. Keanu had seen enough. This wasn't just arrogance. This was a broken system that needed to be fixed. And he was about to do something that no one expected. Keanu walked down the hospital corridor in silence, his expression neutral, but his thoughts burning. What he had witnessed that night wasn't just individual arrogance. It was a system corrupted by indifference. He now fully understood why the reports he had received described the hospital as a place where the poor were ignored and mistreated. But there was still more to uncover. He didn't want to act on impulse alone. He needed more proof. So before leaving, he decided to dig a little deeper. He headed toward a secluded area of the hospital where employees took their breaks. If anyone truly knew what was happening inside these walls, it was the lower-level staff, nurses, receptionists, and technicians who worked directly with patients every day. Keanu stopped beside a slightly open door where he could hear muffled voices. Inside, nurses were speaking in hushed tones, but their words were filled with frustration. Dr. Javier humiliated another patient today, one of the nurses said. Again, another sighed. He always does. But who dares report him? Management protects him. Keanu narrowed his eyes. A younger nurse spoke up. If anyone complains, he finds a way to get back at them, cuts their hours, gives them impossible shifts, bad performance reviews. The conversation continued, but one detail caught Keanu's attention. Management protected Javier. He felt his jaw clench slightly. The problem wasn't just one arrogant doctor. It was something bigger. He stepped forward, revealing himself to the employees, who immediately fell silent upon seeing him at the door. They didn't recognize him yet, but they were clearly surprised to see a patient there. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt," Keanu said, his voice calm but firm. The silence lingered. Then one of the nurses gathered the courage to speak. "Sir, you heard everything?" Keanu nodded slowly. "I did, and I want to understand more about what's happening in this hospital." The staff exchanged uncertain glances. "But who are you?" one of the nurses asked. Keanu didn't answer immediately. He knew it wasn't time yet to reveal himself. "I'm just someone who believes that people should be treated with dignity." The first nurse bit her lip, hesitated for a moment, and then finally decided to trust him. "This goes way beyond Dr. Javier." Keanu crossed his arms, listening attentively. "Management only cares about the numbers. They don't care if patients suffer, as long as the reports show high efficiency. And Dr. Javier? He's one of the doctors who bring in the best numbers." Another nurse nodded in agreement. "Exactly. He keeps the hospital's numbers high because he rushes through cases. If a patient complains, he ignores them. If a test should be run, he skips it to save time." Keanu felt his stomach tighten. So that was it. It wasn't just a matter of ego. There was an entire system enabling this behavior. If he really wanted to change things, firing one doctor wouldn't be enough. He would have to bring down the entire corrupt structure. After speaking with the staff, Keanu returned to the waiting room, observing the patients who were still waiting. An elderly woman was still sitting there clutching her purse after hours of waiting. The young man who had been humiliated by Javier was still there too, pressing a dirty cloth against his wounded hand, too afraid to ask for help again. The mother with the feverish baby was sitting in the same spot, rocking her child in her arms, exhausted and silently crying. Keanu felt his chest tighten. He couldn't let this continue. He had seen enough. It was time to act. Before leaving the hospital, Keanu walked up to one of the security guards. "I'd like to speak with the hospital administrator." The guard frowned, confused. "About what?" Keanu gave a small, enigmatic smile. "He's going to want to hear me out." The guard hesitated, but picked up the phone and made the call. A few minutes later, Keanu was led into a conference room where the hospital's chief administrator was waiting for him. A middle-aged man with graying hair and a stern expression sat with his arms crossed. "What do you want?" the administrator asked, clearly impatient. Keanu walked forward slowly, sitting down at the table with a calm but firm posture. He locked eyes with the administrator before finally speaking. "My name is Keanu Reeves." The room fell into absolute silence. The administrator froze, his face paling slightly. The guards around them exchanged confused glances. Keanu crossed his arms and continued, "And I am the owner of this hospital." The administrator swallowed hard. Keanu's voice remained calm but unwavering. "It seems we have a serious problem here, and I intend to fix it right now." The administrator felt a chill run down his spine. He knew that nothing would ever be the same again. Keanu was about to change everything, and no one was prepared for what was coming next. The conference room fell into absolute silence. The hospital administrator, a man used to dealing with bureaucracy and numbers, felt his breath grow heavy. He never expected that on this night, a simple-looking man would sit in front of him and say the words he had just heard. "Keanu Reeves, the owner of the hospital?" He finally muttered, disbelief etched on his face. Keanu, calm and composed, gave a slight nod. "Yes." The security guards exchanged looks. A nurse who had been standing in the room covered her mouth in shock. The administrator tried to regain his composure, adjusting his collar. "Well, Mr. Reeves, if I had known you were here, we would have ensured a more appropriate level of care." Keanu narrowed his eyes, his expression turning cold. "And why would I need special treatment?" The administrator swallowed hard, realizing he had just exposed himself. I just meant that... You meant that some people here receive better treatment than others." Keanu cut him off, his voice firm. The administrator fell silent. Keanu leaned slightly forward, resting his elbows on the table. "I saw everything. I saw how humble people are treated here. I saw the disregard for patients who need help the most. I saw Dr. Javier humiliating a desperate mother and denying care to an injured young man. I saw employees afraid to report abuse because they know they'll face retaliation." The administrator began to sweat, struggling to maintain his facade. "Mr. Reeves, I understand your concerns, but we have to be realistic. Dr. Javier is one of our most efficient doctors. He keeps the numbers high and..." Keanu raised a hand, cutting him off. "Numbers?" His tone was sharp and cutting. "You think numbers are more important than human lives?" The administrator opened his mouth, but no words came out. "If your hospital maintains high numbers at the cost of human dignity, then it has completely failed." The nurse, who had been silent until now, finally gathered the courage to speak. "He's right. Everyone here knows what Dr. Javier does, but no one dares report him. We've tried, but we're always silenced." Keanu turned to her, his expression filled with respect. "That ends today." The administrator stood frozen, feeling the weight of Keanu's words. Keanu slowly stood up, his presence commanding the room, and looked directly at one of the security guards. "Bring Dr. Javier here, now." A few minutes later, the doors to the conference room swung open. Dr. Javier walked in with confident strides, his face still full of arrogance. "Why the hell was I called in at this hour?" he grumbled, looking around. Then his eyes landed on Keanu Reeves. He frowned, clearly confused. "Who is this?" he asked the administrator. The man hesitated for a second before answering tensely. "He's the owner of the hospital." Dr. Javier froze completely. The color drained from his face. "What?" Keanu crossed his arms and stared directly at him. "So, you're the great Dr. Javier." The doctor was still trying to process what was happening. Keanu didn't wait for him to respond. "I saw everything. I saw how you treat patients, how you ignore those who need help, how you humiliate vulnerable people just because you can." Dr. Javier tried to chuckle, though his voice sounded tense. "Look, I'm just doing my job. I'm not here to babysit people." "Your job?" Keanu repeated, leaning in slightly. "Your job is to care for people, not treat them like garbage." Dr. Javier lost his smirk, now visibly irritated. "I'm an excellent doctor. My numbers prove it." Keanu shook his head slowly. "If your numbers are so good, then why does everyone here fear you?" The doctor stiffened, unable to answer. Keanu turned to the administrator. "Dr. Javier is fired, effective immediately." The room fell into stunned silence. Dr. Javier stepped forward, shocked. "You can't do this." Keanu held his gaze steady. "I can, and I did." The doctor let out an angry growl, but the security guards were already beside him, ready to escort him out. Before he was removed, Keanu gave him one final warning. "And if I ever hear of you working at another hospital and treating patients this way, I will make sure you never practice medicine again." Dr. Javier was dragged out of the room, humiliated and defeated. After Javier was gone, Keanu turned to the hospital administrator. "The changes start now." The employees in the room looked at him with hope in their eyes. "I want an anonymous reporting system for abuse inside this hospital. I want every employee to go through empathy and patient care training. I want patients to be treated with dignity, no matter their financial status." The nurse smiled, her eyes welling with tears. "Is this really possible?" Keanu smiled back. "Yes, and we're going to do it together." The administrator, realizing resistance was futile, finally nodded in agreement. A revolution inside the hospital had begun. In the days that followed, the hospital corridors felt lighter. Patients who were once ignored now received proper care. Employees who once lived in fear of retaliation now worked with motivation. The mother with the feverish baby, who had been humiliated days before, returned to the hospital and finally received the care she needed. The young man with the injured hand was treated with care and respect, and the staff, inspired by the changes, began to feel proud of where they worked. A few weeks later, Keanu returned to the hospital to check on how things were going. He walked through the halls, observing the transformation. As he was about to leave, a small child ran up to him and grabbed his hand. Keanu looked down and saw a 5-year-old boy with bright, curious eyes. "Are you Keanu Reeves, the owner of the hospital?" the boy asked. Keanu smiled and knelt down to his level. "Yes, that's me." The boy grinned shyly. "Thank you for helping people. The doctors are nice now." Keanu felt a lump in his throat. He gently ruffled the boy's hair. Taking care of people is what really matters. He stood up and gazed at the hospital, illuminated against the night sky. Finally, he felt that his vision was becoming reality. Respect and compassion were free, but the lack of them came at a great cost.